हेलो फ्रेंड्स, दिस इज रजत धर फ्रॉम फिनोजेंट सॉल्यूशंस। और आप जानते हैं कि मार्केट क्रैश हो चुका है ट्रम्प टैरिफ्स के हिसाब से, लेकिन फिर भी इंडियन स्टॉक्स, मेनी ऑफ द इंडियन स्टॉक्स एक्सेप्ट प्राइमरली बैंकिंग लेके सारे ओवर वैल्यूड अभी भी हैं। इसका मतलब क्या है कि हम ओवर एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं मार्केट फॉल होने का। लेकिन आज जो मैं ये सेशन ले रहा हूं, मैं ये नहीं बात करूंगा कि मार्केट फॉल है क्या है, बट मैं ट्रम्प टैरिफ को लेके और उसके संबंध में आपके पोर्टफोलियो को लेके कुछ चीजें ऐसे रखूंगा आपके सामने जो इवन आपने कभी सोची नहीं होगी। आयरनी आजकल ये है, वट एवर द इंफॉर्मेशन एंड वट एवर द रिकमेंडेशंस आर गोइंग ऑन एंड फ्लोटिंग अराउंड ऑन लिंक्डइन, यूट्यूब, ट्विटर एंड इंस्टाग्राम इज दैट दे आर टेलिंग अबाउट द सिम्टम्स। वो ये बोल रहे हैं कि भाई ठीक है, ट्रम्प टैरिफ लग रहा है, ट्रम्प टैरिफ से इकोनॉमी में ये होगा वो होगा, लेकिन you cannot look at the global developments or such developments like rate tariffs in its own, you can say, isolation. तो आपको पहले ये देखना है कि ट्रम्प टैरिफ्स लगे क्यों। अगर ट्रम्प टैरिफ लग रहे हैं और यूएस में लग रहे हैं तो क्रॉस पॉलिटिकल एंड क्रॉस ज्योग्राफिकल इंपैक्ट क्या आएगा इकोनॉमीज पे। ना ही केवल वो आपके बॉन्ड्स पे, फिक्स इनकम पोर्टफोलियो पे कैसे काम आएगा, लेकिन उसके लिए आपको एक्चुअली जो व्यू पॉइंट है वो टनल फोकस नहीं रखना है। यू हैव टू कीप एन आई ऑफ ए हॉक। What does that mean? That means there are technically 5 parameters, 5 aspects that you need to know and also understand how Trump tariffs, rate cuts, and all those global tensions are interrelated and what impact it will have you on your portfolio. तो जो आज का सेशन मैं लूंगा, मैं आपको ये दिखाऊंगा, एक तरफ से मास्टर क्लास होगी कि how to understand that trend, कैसे टैरिफ्स इंपैक्ट करेंगे, चाइना आगे जाके क्या स्टेप्स ले सकता है, इंडिया के पास क्या ऑल्टरनेटिव सामने है, चीजें यहां से बद से बदतर होंगी तो आप क्या कर सकते हैं, या अगर आपको कोई क्लू नहीं है आपके पोर्टफोलियो पे क्या करना है तो इस वीडियो में आप हर एक सेशन में क्लियरली डिस्क्रिप्टिव देख सकते हैं ए वे फॉरवर्ड हाउ टू डू इट। सो लेट मी फर्स्ट शेयर विद यू द स्क्रीन, बिकॉज यहां मैं आपको चीजें बिल्कुल हैंड्स ऑन दिखाऊंगा, लाइक ट्रूली लाइक ए मास्टर क्लास। तो सबसे पहली बात आती है, जब आप ट्रम्प टैरिफ्स की बात करते हैं, हमें यह देखना होता है कि जो ये मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक इंपैक्ट आया है वो ब्रॉडर 5 डिफरेंट फोर्सेस से रिलेटेड आया है। तो यहां पे अगर हम पहली बात करते हैं, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट मॉनेटरी या इकोनॉमिक ब्रेकडाउन कैसे हैं, जैसे अब इसका मतलब क्या होता है। इसका मतलब होता है, पहले आपको यह देखना है कि ट्रम्प टैरिफ लगे क्यों। जो अगर हम यूएस की बात करते हैं, यूएस में डेट टू जीडीपी का जो रेशियो है दैट इज 120%। अब इस डेट टू जीडीपी का रेशियो क्या, इसका मतलब है डेट इज अराउंड 120% मोर देन डेट ऑफ देयर जीडीपी। नाउ प्रॉब्लम ये है कि अब जो वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर है, वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर में 2 कैटेगरीज बन चुके हैं। एक आप कह सकते हो डेटर नेशंस, NATIONS, डेटर नेशंस एंड क्रेडिटर नेशंस। यूएस के साथ इशू क्या आया है, यूएस का जो आप ये समझ लीजिए जो स्पेंडिंग है, स्पेंडिंग इज मोर देन दे आर themselves manufacturing, so they are spending more than what they are manufacturing. That means they are consuming more than they are manufacturing. So therefore जो यूएस है, यूएस क्या कर रहा है, अपना प्रोडक्शन बाहर डाल रहा है चाइना में, जिसको आप प्रोडक्शंस कहते हैं, एंड चाइना यहां से इनको क्रेडिट दे रहा है। अब प्रॉब्लम क्या हो जाती है, इससे जो प्रॉब्लम हो गई है यूएस में वो ये हो गया है, एक तो यूएस के पास ट्रेड डेफिसिट है और वहीं पे इसके पास फिजिकल डेफिसिट भी है, जिसको आप कह सकते हो, जिसको हम कहते हैं फिजिकल डेफिसिट एंड करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट। अब सीन ये हो गया है कि अगर अब यूएस के पास तो, बिकॉज व्हेन देयर वाज कोविड गोइंग ऑन, दे प्रिंटेड द डॉलर्स, दे हैव टू सर्विस देयर डेट, एंड द लार्ज पार्ट ऑफ जो यूएस ट्रेजरीज है, जो इनके यूएस के जो बॉन्ड्स हैं, दे आर विद चाइना। चाइना कैन सेल दोज ट्रेजरीज। इस पे हम बाद में आते हैं। अब सीन क्या है, सीन कहने का मतलब ये है, सबसे पहला हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव ये होता है कि जो टैरिफ है, टैरिफ लगेगी। टैरिफ इसलिए लगेगी भाई 120% डेट आपका जीडीपी से है, आप कुछ मैन्युफैक्चर नहीं कर रहे, आप पैसा बाहर दे रहे हो और अपने पैसा रेज करना है, यू आर प्रिंटिंग द बॉन्ड्स, बॉन्ड्स आप बेच रहे हो बाहर, उसके अगेंस्ट आप पैसा रेज कर रहे हो, उस पैसे से आप कंजम्पशन कर रहे हो, बट पैसा तो चाइना का है, ब्याज के साथ तो आपको लौटाना पड़ेगा ना उसको. So therefore you have to buy back your bonds. So now therefore in order to reverse that trend they have got into the tariff. Now अब जब हम इस डेट की, फिजिकल और मॉनेटरी डेट की, करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट की बात करें, इस चीज को अब एक माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक इंपैक्ट भी आता है. माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक इंपैक्ट क्या है? वही चीज है जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट देखने की है, जहां से आपको फर्स्ट क्लू लगेगा कि आपके पोर्टफोलियो पे इंपैक्ट क्या है. कंट्री लेवल में अगर आपका डेट इंक्रीज हो रहा है, दिस विल लीड टू इंटरेस्ट रेट इंक्रीज. अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट इंक्रीज होगा तो इसका मतलब है आपका लोन इंक्रीज होगा. अगर आपका लेंडिंग रेट्स इंक्रीज हैं तो इसका मतलब है दिस विल लीड टू योर कॉस्ट एस्केलेशन. कॉस्ट एस्केलेशन होगा, इसका मतलब है आपकी सेविंग्स हैं वो नीचे जाएंगी. इसका मतलब है प्रेशर आएगा ऑन कॉर्पोरेट्स अर्निंग्स, या जिसको आप कह सकते हैं मार्जिन्स. कॉर्पोरेट्स क्या करेंगे या गवर्नमेंट क्या करेगी? दे विल कट डाउन ऑन स्पेंडिंग. अगर वो अपना स्पेंडिंग के ऊपर ही कट डाउन कर लेंगी, इफ दे विल जस्ट कट डाउन ऑन देयर स्पेंडिंग, देयरफॉर ग्रोथ विल फॉल. तो ये पहली चीज है. ना ही केवल ये, अगर हम कहते हैं कि इसमें सरकार भी स्पेंडिंग कम करेगी, सपोज फॉर एग्जांपल द यूएस गवर्नमेंट कट्स डाउन द स्पेंडिंग, देन देयरफॉर demand falls, which will lead to lower growth again, and which leads to stagflation, जो कि बाद में stagflation करेगा. stagnant हो जाएगी, एक तरफ से आप समझ लीजिए, एक तरफ से आप समझ लीजिए कि stagnant हो जाएगी आपकी ग्रोथ. ठीक है, ये चीज आप पकड़ लीजिए यहां से. अब देखिए यहां पे आप सीन, हमारे पास नेक्स्ट सीन हमारे पास ये आता है कि चाइना क्या कर सकता है. अब यूएस ने तो आपको टैरिफ लगा लिए. अगर यूएस ने टैरिफ लगा लिए, सो व्हाट कैन चाइना डू? चाइना कहेगा कि भाई आई एम सेलिंग योर सिक्योरिटीज, जिसको ट्रेजरी कहते हैं. नाउ इफ चाइना इज सेलिंग द ट्रेजरी सिक्योरिटीज, इट विल लीड टू द क्रैश ऑफ बॉन्ड एंड इक्विटी मार्केट बोथ ड्रास्टिकली. तो ये चीज है, तो ये एक पहली चीज है. अब इसमें आप कह सकते हो कि भाई दूसरी चीज हम ये ले सकते हैं इसमें, से फॉर एग्जांपल, एक तो है कि ये चाइना कर सकता, अगर चाइना के पास, दिस इज आल्सो वन ऑफ द वेपन दैट चाइना हैज हैविंग विद इट इटसेल्फ. नाउ व्हाट यूएस कैन डू कि भाई शुड इट प्रिंट मनी? इट कैन नॉट. इट विल, इफ इट प्रिंट्स मनी इट विल अगेन लीड टू इन्फ्लेशन. प्रिंट नहीं कर सकता है, हद से ज्यादा प्रिंट कर चुका है. दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई इट इज पुटिंग ऑन द टैरिफ, सो दैट प्रोडक्शंस और बाकी सब चीजें, जॉब क्रिएशंस वहां पे आए. अभी तक तो बिकॉज ऑफ द कंटिन्यूअस प्रिंटिंग ऑफ द मनी हैज लेड टू इट. सो देयरफॉर इससे ग्लोबल ट्रेड भी डिसरप्ट हो जाएगा. सो यहां पे अब इसका मतलब ये आ जाता है, अब ये जो चीजें आ जाती है यहां पे, व्हाट डज दिस मीन फॉर, यू कैन से, इंडियन इन्वेस्टमेंट्स. अब देखिए, अगर हम इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आते हैं, अब कॉन्टेक्स्ट, पहली चीज तो आप ये पकड़ लीजिएगा, इफ अगर यूएसडी वीक होता है, वीकन्स, इट विल ऑल्सो पुट प्रेशर ऑन आईएनआर. सो रुपी डिप्रिसिएशन बढ़ जाएगा अगर यूएस अपना प्रेशर में आएगा. दूसरी बात, अगर हमें हेज ही करना है, हेज करने के लिए हमारे पास दो ऑप्शंस आ जाते हैं. एक आ जाता है आपके पास गोल्ड, एक आ जाता है हार्ड एसेट्स. तो ये चीज आ जाती है. और जहां तक हम डाइवर्सिफिकेशन की, वी हैव टू सी वन थिंग. पहले गेट आउट ऑफ और रिड्यूस एक्सपोजर टू यूएस. सेकेंड क्या हो सकता है, यू कैन डाइवर्सिफाई योर होल्डिंग विद, से फॉर एग्जाम्पल EU और यूरोप or APAC, Asia Pacific, Asia for that matter. So you can diversify even if you want to head something out globally. So this is the thing. तो इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट की मैं बात करूं आपको यूएस ट्रेजरी के चाहे बॉन्ड्स हो या इक्विटीज हो, यू कैन बी uncorrelated with that, you can be out of it and diversify across different other geographies. Now बात आ जाती है अब हम एसेट क्लास क्या लें. जहां तक बात आती है कि बिकॉज यहां पे यू हैव टू स्प्रेड योर बास्केट, सो यू कैन गो फॉर मल्टी एसेट. What does multi-asset means? Multi-asset means some of your have to be into gold, some has to be into REITs, some has to be into commodities, some has to be into say for example energy, renewables. वो मैं आगे I will come in detail on that part. Now, while this can act as a hedge against inflation, REITs can support you on yields. सीधी सी बात है. सप्लाई साइड प्रॉब्लम आएगी तो कमोडिटी विल सपोर्ट यू. कमोडिटी हालांकि इट इज वेरी वोलेटाइल, इट इज वेरी वोलेटाइल, बट यू कैन बेनिफिट इन केस देयर आर ग्लोबल डिसरप्शंस एज फार एज इट गोस. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर हम एक केस ले लेते हैं iPhone also, say for example this comes to my within the third or fourth step of this first point, monetary and economic breakdown की ही मैं अभी बात कर रहा हूं. From stocks perspective, if you will see that for now with tariff on China, iPhone predominantly आप ये पकड़ लो एक इंडिया में बन रहे हैं और एक चाइना में बन रहे हैं. यहां पे टैरिफ इंक्रीज हो गया है. So it is more prudent to make more and more iPhones here. So what we can expect is companies which are manufacturing iPhones, say for example, I'm not recommending anything, but we know that companies like Dixon Technologies is manufacturing iPhone in India. So they automatically some of the production capabilities will shift to India and some might trickle down to Dixon Technologies. And I believe now iPhone is also being manufactured with with more two vendors, of which one is one of the flagship companies of Tata. I don't know whether it is Tata Technologies or what, but there is one company from the Tata stable that manufactures iPhone. So therefore, now the point is whether you can identify companies across different sectors which might benefit due to some of the trickling effect because of the rerouting of vendors or the global supply chains. So that is the point. Okay. Now this brings us to the second main factor. First was your monetary and economic breakdown. Second is your domestic political breakdown. So now what does this mean? We know that whether you talk about US, UK or you talk about the India, now आजकल problem ये होगी है कि there has been enormous inequalities in terms of the quality of education we are getting and accordingly the type of opportunities we are having. So technically the type of education, costing, living standards has gone high, that has not been able to keep touch with the type of opportunities or income generating opportunities that are democratically available across the board. So there has been a divergence with regard to that. Now government has now a problem in order to provide more income opportunities or better living conditions. What it can do, it could stimulate the economy while obviously stabilizing its own economy. What it will do, it will try to stimulate the economy. What does stimulation of an economy means? It means it will print more and more money that will go into the system so that people have more money at their hands and then they can take a call what they want to do. So that is the one thing they will be having. The second is to impose austerity. Example of austerities we have seen in our budget. Nirmala Sitharaman had reduced or kept the same as far as the money that was kept there for the public sector spending, because उन्होंने कहा था कि पिछले साल उतना यूज नहीं हुआ और इस साल उतनी डिमांड नहीं होगी और उन्होंने ऑस्टेरिटी रखी. सो टेक्निकली गवर्नमेंट्स के पास यही डिलेमा होता है कि हम पैसा प्रिंट करके छापे, मार्केट में फ्लड करें पैसा बिकॉज इन्फ्लेशन विल गो हाई, या फिर हम ऑस्टेरिटी करें, वो करें ना. इसका माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक इम्पैक्ट ये आ जाता है कि अगर डोमेस्टिकली देयर आर टेंशंस एंड यू विल सी देयर इज अ इनकम डिस्पैरिटीज even within the country, with you can say tier 2, tier 3 cities and the main cities, you have seen daily NCR or many peak cities become unlivable and unaffordable for a normal middle class person to buy a house. So therefore, what does this mean? This means that the businesses technically, because this will lead to social tension, so this means that businesses जो हैं आपके, they are facing not only social tensions, but they're also having unusual regulatory environments. So now what you are having an unstable regulatory environments. Now what will happen? This will lead to, because the government will be taking decisions ki, okay, now let us be let's pursue austerity. They will not be spending too much of money. Since they are not spending too much of money, they will be coming harsh with the regulations. If they're coming harsh with the regulations, it is an unusual regulatory environment, which will, what do you say, the consumer sentiment, it will fall, which will lead to reduced job creation and even public investment. So ये चीज हो जाता है. Now, when we're talking about this, there are also cases where there is public sector inefficiencies which will distort market and kill private enterprise. Now, let me cite an example with you, which one of, I believe, one of the founders of Infosys also shared on Twitter a couple of days back. An individual, and in I believe one of the business owners or an individual, he had received a tax notice. So he had received a tax notice of, I believe, 69 lakhs. This was, I believe, in 2013. In 2019, from 2013 to 2000, in 2019, he had filed the taxes for 2013 already. Then he got tax notice in 2019. Now he fought that. And won in 2024. That means around 5 years legal battle. But in order to challenge that notice, he had to deposit 20%. That means around 14 lakhs with IT department. Now the issue was that income tax department did wrong calculation. Now the issue is, because of this public sector inefficiency, a business owner is struggling and depositing and locking his money of 14 lakhs, which is a 20% of the claimed amount, and also spending the time, energy, peace of mind, and the legal fees, and at the end of it, he wins the case. But how will multinationals feel safe in India to do business? Because this is called as tax terrorism. So this is actually the case we are referring to when we talk about the domestic policy decisions. Now what happens when you talk about the domestic policy decisions and why it impacts? Say, for example, there could be polarized politics. And if there could be elections coming nearer to different states and all, then we can see different announcements going, making by the, you can say, governments to appease the voters. And that might not only put the financial strain, but not be good for the economy at a broader. Say, for example, let's put it in US, you have an issue called as debt ceiling. How much of the debt you can, how much of the money you can print, and you can see every year or every couple of months they have a challenge like debt ceiling, and it has to be passed into the parliament, and then they get the bill passed, and then they print the money, and then the government continues to work. So normally, just एक बहुत simple भाषा में आपको मैंने बोला कि वहां पे भी अगर आप देखोगे डेमोक्रेट्स और रिपब्लिकन्स लड़ते रहते हैं से ऑन डेट सीलिंग. जहां तक हम इंडिया की बात करते हैं, इंडिया में जो बात आती है वो लैंड रिफॉर्म्स के ऊपर आती है एंड वो एग्री के ऊपर आती है, चाहे वो आप मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस या बाकी चीजें कहिए. नाउ ये तो चीजें ऐसी हैं कि इफ इन दिस ईयर और सब्सिक्वेंट ईयर इफ समथिंग गेट्स सर्टेन पोलराइज्ड बिकॉज ऑफ इलेक्शंस कमिंग अप इन बिगर स्टेट्स सो ऑन सो फोर्थ, देन वी आल्सो हैव टू टेक इनटू अकाउंट व्हेन वी आर स्ट्रक्चरिंग द portfolios. So this is अब बात इसमें ये आ जाती है, अगर हम इन चीजों को लेके चलते हैं और हम ये कहते हैं कि पोलराइजेशन एंड जो ब्रेकडाउन ऑफ डोमेस्टिक पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज होते हैं, चाहे इंडिया हो या यूएस हो, देन व्हाट इज देयर फॉर एन इंडियन इन्वेस्टर? Okay, so when we are looking at what is there for Indian investors, we are looking at certain sectors which are predominantly, first, central government की बात कर रहे हैं हम, अगर हम, that is what is main, that is currently stable. Because it is stable, there will be always a premium in the market for India per se, apart from whatever the GDP growth rate, repo rate fall, and all other lesser inflation, all that being into the place, because we have a stable government in the center, that will add stability premium to our market. During elections, we have to see what the risk could be there. But if we want to focus on any sector, on an element from this perspective, that could be an infra, that could be defense, that could be anything that will be related to Atmanirbhar Bharat. That means anything which is related to domestic growth. So even if there could be different PMS, or there could be multi-cap funds which are focusing on infrastructure, or they are focusing on the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat and sectors like infrastructure and defense, where we can expect spending to still continue on that parlance. So this is here. Now this brings us to the third element that is very important to look, is international geopolitical breakdown. International geopolitical breakdown. So first was your macroeconomics. The second was your domestic and political landscape. Second is your global issues. Now what is an issue here is to look at US has shifted from multilateral to unilateral. What does this mean? This means they have gone to America first. Okay. So now since has gone from this, we can see there could be different blocks, like you have BRICS, and you have EU, you have ASEAN, working much among themselves. But this also provides a risk where China would be dumping to India or other countries. So this could also be the case that we can see. Now the key impact, when we are talking about international, impact, would be new supply lines would have to be defined. बिकॉज जो पुराना ट्रेड रूट्स, पुराना ट्रेड बिजनेस, जो सप्लाई लाइंस जहां से आती थी वहां से तो आएंगे नहीं. से सपोज चाइना हैड बीन इंपोर्टिंग मच गुड्स फ्रॉम चाइना, और Europe would have been supplying much to the US, but now the US has imposed tariffs over the China, and Chinese goods and the European goods might not be price beneficial for American citizens, so they will not be importing it, or the reducing of the imports. So those have to be changed. So the two new areas or new geographical regions, so therefore new supply lines has to be done. Now if you do this will lead to enormous costs, which again will be passed to you and me, that is a consumer. That means it will increase inflation further. Increase inflation further. Now here the main issue would be rare and commodities. Some can be used as weapons. So we have already seen China stopping rare earth to be supplied to US. They are not letting it happen. On the other hand, US also knows that as far as sale of goods are concerned or export is concerned, China at time is using Vietnam as a proxy to supply goods and services. So again, they are also stopping this route. So whether you talk about raw materials, whether you talk about finished goods, everything is to be again defined. Everything will be defined. Now the issue, what happens when tariff increase? Because we're talking about here international or geopolitical, or you can say cross-border trade. So if the tariff is increased, what happens? It reduces your trade volume. Since it reduces your trade volume, it reduces your GDP automatically, which leads to reduce in the corporate earnings, and we see stock market crash. Now, this thing doesn't stop here. The next step, if we talk about, is currency war. Now, you will say, what is the currency war? Currency war will be because exports are being made more and more costlier. There will be efforts by nations to devalue their currency, or you can say in simple term, depreciate their currency. If the currency devaluates, exports become cheaper. If they become cheaper, they can offset to a certain extent the tariffs. Now the problem is smaller countries will get killed. Simple. It's not the countries have not done it. Korea had also done it when there had been the Korean crisis, and many countries like Malaysia, Indonesia had done it. The China had done it, the devaluation of the currency, which made their exports much more competitive and much more cheaper for that matter. Now the fourth element that comes would be the climate or acts of nature. Because what is happening, like we have seen the wildfires in Los Angeles, we have seen COVID, we have seen the climatic typhoons, cyclones and all going all over the world, and the rising temperatures, not only in India, but also in the Europe last year also. So what is going to happen is climate disasters, जो climate है, it is affecting crops. So because, and then this will lead to food inflation. So this then leads to food inflation. And now when there is a food inflation, capital formation stops. This is because the money is more and more money is going to inflation because it is related to the food. You cannot live without food. So this is not a discretionary spending which you may delay or say, okay, let me do it next quarter. The food is something you will eventually be spending money on. Now, the issue with this is now the microeconomic impact will be as under. जो आपके input cost होते हैं, because they will increase because of the inflations, your margins will reduce. इसके ऊपर there will be a pressure for ESG compliance. Now, let me give you a practical example for it. Today is 9th of April 2025, and the news has come that from 15th of August 2026, no two-wheelers which are run on petrol, CNG, etc. This means everything has to be electric as far as two-wheelers are concerned. Now, why they are doing it? It is obviously the macroeconomic impact of the aspect of the climate. Whether you talk about you have to build through sustainability goals that India has committed to, or you have to address the greenhouse effect gases, or you have to improve the carbon footprint. Whether you talk about the corporates, which eventually will be under the pressure for it, but there will also be pressure from the government on the normal people to act on these things. So therefore, agriculture, tourism, logistics and insurance will obviously be bearing the climate risk. And why I am saying it, when you look at it, who are having the risk? पहली बात है, agri will be impacted, your tourism will be impacted, logistics, insurance. Now the problem is, if you will see that over the years, over the last 3 to 4 years, there has been enormous increase in, for example, health insurance premium itself. So this is just one example. Why they are increasing the premium exorbitantly? Because of, obviously, because of the number of the claims and number of the people dying with, say, for example, the heart attack that had happened because of the COVID thing, and we have seen people dying at a very young age because of the lifestyle diseases also that has started coming up. We are seeing the premiums going up. So this is one of the impact that we have been telling about. There are the crops that are going out, so therefore the more focus will be on the companies which are working on the agri-tech or which are working on resistant crops, जिसको हम कहते हैं climate resistant crops, or you can talk about, say, for example, the agricultural technology that works into that parlance. And if you look from the India's context, the rural consumption theme is one we are looking at. Now this brings us to the last main element that goes is about technological transformation. So when we are talking about fifth element here, so here we are talking about the winner takes it all. Now the problem is innovation. If we talk about innovation for that matter, it is growing at a faster pace than your either regulation or workforce skilling. And if you know from the letter shared by one of the Shopify head CEOs on LinkedIn by Shopify, he said that now AI is your colleague and you have to work alongside, and the people who are joining for any post at Shopify would have to know and have the skill to use AIs and optimize their levels. There are the many companies who are totally going full gungo on AI and eventually rendering many people jobless. So therefore what will happen? There will be tremendous job displacements. So now if there are job displacements, people who are losing jobs, what would they do? They could either be Uber drivers, or they would be Blinkit drivers, or they could be doing their gig jobs. So what does this mean? What does this mean? This means that if they become gig workers, there will be income instability. There will be an income instability. And there will be health care cost issues that would come up. Now, not only that, say for example, if for example you're talking about the gig jobs or you're talking about the income instability, what this will lead to? This will lead to lower lending. Because these people do not have a stable job, nobody will lend. Because the lending will decrease, consumption decreases, growth decreases, because earnings decreases. So therefore slump. Now what would happen if such displacements happen? Government will be forced to do what? Ki minimum or basic income guarantee. If they do this, this will again increase costing on corporates, which eventually will increase cost, which customer will pay, leading to increased inflation and therefore less consumption. So now this brings us to the key question: what an investor can do if these things happen in the foreseeable future. So the point is simple. We know that there will be disruption due to tech. You can go through PMS or AIF route to AI or tech enabled next generation businesses. Because the problem is, जो आपका old business model था, banks ले लेते हम plus infra ले लेते हैं, that will be shifted by AI plus tech. So that is the case. So these are the things. Even when you're talking about the climate specific or a ESG, or you're talking about the agri, there are structured products that explore those areas. Now, from the investor perspective, the question stands: what an investor should do. What are the top 5 things he can do? To do simple for investors. First, diversify across geographies, because you still need to have a benefit of currency. So you can go for broader Asia, EU, etc. Second is focus on resilience. What does that mean? Defensive stocks, FMCG, healthcare. So you have defensive stocks, FMCG, healthcare going on, and building on जिसको आप एक तरह से कहते हैं utilities. These are the stocks which will withstand the market turmoil. So you have to use gold as a hedge. You have to monitor macroeconomic policies that are announced, चाहे वो रेट कट हो रहा है, रेट कट बढ़ रहा है, फिजिकल प्रूडेंस हो रही है, ऑस्टेरिटी ला रहे हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं. You have to monitor them. If you are not able to monitor them, you will not be able to benefit it. The rate cuts are happening, the fixed income funds or the debt funds are giving the double-digit returns, so on and so forth. So then you also have to look at long-term perspective. देखिए, when we talk about the long-term perspectives, what we say that these are cyclical disruptions, and while it is a cyclical disruptions, your view has to be long term, but your risk, जिसको हम कहते हैं but, your risk management has to be short term and dynamic. If you're able to do that, that's great. तो पहली बात है, when we're talking about this, there's one more thing. You have to rebalance debt and equity allocations quarterly. You have to allocate debt and equity allocations quarterly. You can have 15% into gold and some global assets, 10 to 15 in global assets, 10 to 15 in gold, then have some in commodities. You can have thematic funds or the PMSs for that matter, whether that is infra, ESG, defense, or AI for that matter, so that they are also less overlapping, and you can say correlation among the different asset classes, and you have more optimized return on the different asset classes. This should not happen that one asset class cuts the other asset class, and in the end you have nothing on your platter as far as the tangible returns are concerned. Then obviously there has to be tactical cash of 10% every time and any time available with you to take the most benefit of it, and then your strategy alignment on across all AIF and PMS portfolio. So if you are already having an AIF PMS portfolio, the first thing you need to do is to review them, whether you still need to have those in your kitty, sell them out, come out of it, have a revised AIF PMS or a broader equity portfolio structure based on the current norms, because the AIF PMS that you have taken have been for the rest yesteryears, not from the current perspective as they had been. Thank you so much. This is Rajat Dhar signing off. Have a great day.